12 verse 1, because this week's portion is parashat Hachodesh. We're going to read parashat Hachodesh because the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, we read about Rosh Chodesh, and this is the first mitzvah given to the Jewish people. So Vayomer Hashem al Moshe vel Aaron be'eretz Mitzrayim lemor. God spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, Rashi says, Bishvil sha'aron asa. Why does it say? Why did God speak to Aaron? Is what's bothering Rashi. We know why God spoke to Moses. Why is God also giving this first mitzvah to Aaron too? Why is Aaron getting the glory? So Rashi says, Bishvil sha'aron asa v'tarach b'movtim k'Moshe. Aaron went around and exerted himself like Moshe. Therefore, God gave him this honor of the first mitzvah. Shekulalo in Moshe b'dibur. He was included with Moshe when God spoke to him. Can you imagine the merit that Aaron got to be included in this holy mitzvah, the first mitzvah? But also the first mitzvah was given in the land of Egypt. Be'eretz Mitzrayim chutz lekrach. He gave it to him outside the city. Maybe it took place, the speech was in the city. Says the verse, Kitzeiti et ha'ir, when I leave the city. Umat tefillah lo kala. So basically Moshe prayed, Moshe says, I'm going to spread out my hands in prayer to God when I leave the city. Moshe didn't want to pray in the same city as Pharaoh because there were getchkas there. Getchka is the Yiddish word for idol. So he says, Moses was afraid to even pray in his city with idolatry. Dibur Chamar will call came for sure the speech that God was going to give to him would not happen in the city. And why didn't God not speak to Moshe inside the city? Because it was filled with idols. So I guess we were we have to recognize that the Egyptians were idolaters. Why is Moses' prayer called a tefillah kala? A very powerful phrase from Rashi. So why was it called a minor prayer? So the commentary here notes that it's because as opposed to Rosh Chodesh, which was the first mitzvah, this was a prayer on behalf of Pharaoh to stop the plagues. That was just called a minor prayer. And now we come to the first mitzvah of the Torah, the first mitzvah given to the Jewish people. This is the mitzvah that made us a nation. This is a mitzvah that made us a nation. Hachodesh hazeh lachem, Rosh Chodeshim. This month shall be for you, Rosh Chodesh. Rishon lachem l'chadshei hashana. The first, it shall be the first for you of the months of the year. Now, actually, it is a connection because the Mishkan, our parsha, is going to tell us that the Mishkan will be built, be set up for the first time on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So that's exactly 1 year. So from Exodus chapter 12, verse 2 to the last few verses of the Exodus takes exactly 1 year. And I would say that the past few months, I've had the great honor, I've gone up and participated in a special Nate's Rosh Chodesh davening that we davened at sunrise. And it's been so spiritually inspiring for me. I've done it in New Jersey with a group of people who just take the davening so extraordinarily seriously. And it's been incredibly inspiring. My friends, I suggest taking a chumash because the table is so full that we don't have enough chumashim. Okay, so yes, Jerry. Yeah, Jerry.
Yes. So the Jews were wandering in the Sinai desert a full year before they were during the construction period of the Mishkan. And it was finally 365 days later that they assembled it into a building, a structure. Is that what we are to learn?
No, well, Rashi says the chronology is as follows, Jerry. Thank you for reminding us because we did it this week, but we'll remind ourselves of it. So Rashi tells us that this was the chronology. Now, we know here in our portion, I'm just going to mute you and you can unmute if you want to have a rebuttal or a follow-up question, that this is the first day of Nisan. They don't leave until Pesach, which is the 15th, the night of the 14th. Then they come to the sea on the 21st day. That's the 7th day of Pesach. Then 7 weeks later, they're at Sinai, which is an 11-day journey from Hachodesh Barnea. And then they're at Mount Sinai, which we learned from Professor Aaron Kohler this week on the Zoom, is almost certainly in current day Saudi Arabia. Then they were at Sinai and they stayed from Shavuot until Moses goes up to the mountain. And then from Shavuot, he came down 40 days later. And then basically it goes through a period of 120 days until Yom Kippur, when he comes down with the second set of tablets after the golden calf and after a period of repentance. Then the day after Yom Kippur is when Moshe commands them, when God tells Moshe to build the Mishkan. After the Mishkan, then they build the Mishkan, and really they finished with the construction of the Mishkan by Hanukkah, Rashi tells us elsewhere, the 25th of Kislev. There was no Hanukkah yet, but that's when they finished. And then the Mishkan is put up the week before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Moshe puts it up every day and takes it down, and then puts it up for good on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So that's the chronology. So, and then they're going to leave Har Sinai. And I was just discussing this with Jill, that's where we pick up the story in the book of Bamidbar. Pick up the story, yes.
Picks it up and takes it down every day.
You should get a chumash for the first week, yeah, prior to them doing it.
How many hours did it take to erect and dismantle the Mishkan?
Yeah.
Daily?
Yeah,
That seems-
Moshe, it was miraculous. It was miraculous that Hashem was helping Moshe.
Okay, there's no way they physically.
Nobody else could
done that.
physically do it, and Hashem said, "You do your part, and I'll make it go up." Yes, Jerry, you had a question. You follow.
Two questions about Saudi
Yeah.
Arabia being the location of
Okay.
Mount Sinai.
Yeah.
Are there any mountains in Saudi Arabia, or is
Yeah,
it?
I could send you the YouTube link so that you could see it. I don't want to get too distracted here, but yeah, there's several mountains that are very strong candidates.
All right. The second question is, you laid out a very short distance from Egypt to way thousands, at least 1,000 miles from Egypt to Saudi Arabia.
No. You
how
have
could
to
the Jews-
watch. No.
Wait, how could the Jews travel that long distance in that short period that you just outlined?
You have to see this YouTube video. They went to Kadesh Barnea. From Kadesh Barnea, the Torah tells us it's an 11-day journey to Mount Sinai. And he showed us in the video that it's 195 miles from Kadesh Barnea to Jebel Harb, which is the theory that I think is most likely is Mount Sinai. And that you could certainly do in 11 days. And Kadesh Barnea is in the Sinai desert. From there till Jebel Harb in northern Saudi Arabia is certainly doable an 11-day journey. But I'll send you the video if you want to watch it, so you can watch the YouTube video. Okay, and then we could discuss.
Please do send it.
I will, God willing, bli neder. Okay, so now the Rashi tells us, Hachodesh hazeh, this month. We're in chapter 20, verse 12, chapter 12, verse 2 of Exodus. And then it states, Hachodesh hazeh, this month, God showed Moses the moon in its renewal. And he said to him, when the moon becomes new like this, of course we know that the moon is always the same size. It's just that the moon is blocked by the sun. And then when it's totally blocked by the sun, then we don't see it. So then when the moon when the sun is not directly blocking the moon, that's what's called the mola, and the moon is, so to speak, reborn. And so that's the so what?
The earth is blocking the moon, right?
The earth is blocking the moon, excuse me, not the sun, the earth. So therefore, wait 1 second, the earth we're on the earth, we're not blocking it.
We can block the moon, but you've got the sun, the earth, and the moon, and then the earth would block the light to the moon.
Oh, because we'll be in
The sun
front of the
to
sun.
block the moon would have to
Right,
be
you're correct. Yeah. I misspoke. But anyway, the point is, I want to read this. I got distracted by this footnote, this beautiful footnote. This beautiful footnote says, although the common translation of Rosh Chodesh is new moon, it should be noted that the dictionary's definition of new moon is different from the halacha concept. The English term new moon refers to the period when the moon is invisible. But Rosh Chodesh, or as Rashi writes here, Levana b'chidusha, refers to the reappearance of the moon in its crescent shape after its invisible period. Wow. Okay, so let's go back to what Rashi says. He showed, and right. So when the earth, as Rabbi Yocheved correctly points out, when the earth is directly in between the sun and the moon, then the moon is not going to be visible. So therefore, the verse does not depart from its literal meaning. Moshe said this with respect to the month of Nisan. That Nisan is the head of all the months. And Sivan Shlishi. That Iyar is called the second month and Sivan the third month. So therefore, we do not count our months from the creation of the world. We count our months from our own creation as a nation, our destiny. We create our own destiny. We are not acted upon. We create our own destiny. It's us. The world revolves around us. Yeah, that's basically the message. This month, Hachodesh Hazeh, Rashi says, Nitkashem Moshe Moed Alavana. Moses had a hard time understanding the reappearance of the moon. Be'ezu Shiur Teraviti Eru Yala Kadesh. He didn't know how much it had to be in order for it to be sanctified. So God showed Moses the moon in the sky. And God said to him, when you see the moon like this, then you have to sanctify it. But now Rashi asks a very good question. How could Moses have possibly seen the moon? God spoke to Moses only during the day. All the other prophets, God spoke to them only at night. But Moses, God spoke to him only during the day, as it states, "Vahi b'yom diber Hashem, b'yom tzavato, min hayom asher tiva Hashem ba'ala." All these are references to God speaking to Moses during the day. So God showed it to him right before sunset, and then showed it to him as it was getting dark. You could see the moon even before the sun sets. But the thing is, Rashi's question is not a great one, because these verses just say that God spoke to Moses that day. None of these verses say that God did not speak to Moses ever at night. God could have just spoken to him at night. I don't understand that Rashi's question, but okay. Now we're up to chapter 12, verse 3. Daberu al kol adat Yisrael. God says to them, now we get to the mitzvah of taking the Paschal lamb. Speak to the children of Israel, saying, on the 10th day of this month, so you have to start preparing for Pesach 10 days before. Take for yourselves a lamb for your father's home, a lamb for your household. I want to just say this. Like every year for the last 25 years, we've been making Pesach in our home, except for last year when we started the yeshiva. Then Ronnie says, yeshiva means we go away for Pesach. So we went, we rented a house with our family. We have a minion. Then we rented a house in the middle of nowhere, and we're doing it again this year. And I realized that when you go away, and I know not everybody has the ability to go away, and I understand that. I'm not trying to make you feel bad, God forbid, accept my apologies. I'm just saying what it meant, what I realized when we went away was, it's not just going away. It's the whole month before Pesach, which raises everybody's stress level like by 1,000. Like everybody's just thinking about it, just like, there's a lot of stress involved. I'm preaching to the choir here, but there's a lot of stress involved, which goes beyond just the holiday, cleaning the home, preparing this, that, and that. And so I just felt it for the first time last year, because we had never done it before. And I just realized this makes sense why 9 out of 10 Jews go to Florida for Pesach. I've never been a foreigner for Pesach, but now I understood why they did that, because your stress level is totally different. And it's and okay, anyway, that was just, I know, it's like, yes, in other news, there's gravity also. I didn't realize it. Okay, so speak to the children of Israel. Dabru al kol adat Yisrael. So the verse Rashi says, "V'chi Aaron medaber," is Aaron the one speaking? Didn't already say to Moses. So it says, "Speak to the children of Israel." So here it's speaking to both Moshe and Aaron. So Rashi is saying Aaron wasn't the one to speak. God said to Moses, "You have to be the one to speak." And this is so beautiful. Moses and Aaron would give honor to each other. They would say to each other, "Teach me what God just taught me." And then they would speak, and it would be as both of them were speaking together. When two people are obviously looking for each other's, wanting the other to do well. Yeah, so that's when you have Moshe and Aaron. This beautiful model of leadership. And the verse says, the Rashi says, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them on the 10th day of the month." Rashi tells us exactly how to read the verse. Speak to them today on Rosh Chodesh, so that they should take this lamb on the 10th day of the month. That's what it means. Speak to them on Rosh Chodesh and tell them that when the 10th day of the month comes, you're supposed to take this lamb. Celebrate, celebrate. Everybody has to take a lamb for their household, a lamb for each house. Rashi says, celebrate the vote mishpacha achat, for one extended family. Harei shayu merubin, yachol se'achad kulan. But if you have a large family, you're gonna have one little lamb for everybody. So that's what the verse says, celebrate. So a lamb for each household, meaning to say that if you have too many people for one lamb, you have to get more than a lamb. More than one lamb, you have to have two lambs. But if the household will be too small for a lamb, let's say it's just a couple, just two people, they can't eat a whole lamb. Then what do they have to do? And he has to invite over his neighbor into his house. According to the number of people, everyone needs to be counted for the lamb. I believe that this is the only commandment where we see like the commandment to invite a neighbor over for a meal. It's also the only commandment to do something as a family, as a household. There's no other commandment like this in the Torah. Rashi says, this reminds me of the story that they went, the great rabbi who passed away, Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky, when did he pass away? Maybe, I don't know exactly the date, but maybe a year ago, I don't remember exactly when, that they said to him, the computer says, that Bar-Ilan CD-ROM came out and they said, the computer says that there's, I forgot how many times, number of times that Moshe's name appears in the Torah. He said, no, it's not true. He said, the computer is off by 2 because the computer ran Moshe, Mem, Shin, Hey, but they counted Miseh and that appears. So he had to deduct that. He told them, he corrected the computer. If there'll be too few people for a single lamb, that they won't be able to eat it, and then the meal, the lamb will come to a state of notar. Notar means remainder, that you have a certain amount of time to eat the meat of the animal. And if you don't eat that meat in that amount of time, then you have to burn it. So you don't want to bring a sacrificial food to this state called notar. So therefore, you have to invite your neighbors over so you don't come to having to burn it. Yes.
Would this be a source for the mitzvah of hospitality?
I think that the stronger source usually is Avram. But this is specifically about this mitzvah.
This is a mitzvah and that's not. That's a
right. So this is not usually cited as a mitzvah.
Across that. I just
right. Yeah, very interesting point. But it's not usually cited as a mitzvah. But what I have seen is that there are certain sacrifices that are very large And the purpose of them, like for example, the Netziv says it's about the Thanksgiving offering. You have to eat the Thanksgiving offering with 40 loaves of bread, and you have only a very small amount of time to eat it. So therefore, you obviously have to invite your friends over when you're making a meal, expressing your gratitude to God for something that you feel you have been blessed with. You have to have a lot of food in a very short amount of time. The only way to do that is to have a kiddush, basically. Sponsor the kiddush, everybody comes over and eats it. So, okay, the next Rashi says, midrash, that there's another, oh wait, did I skip? No, there's another midrash about this associated with it. That after a person was registered for the Paschal Lamb, they are able to reduce their number and withdraw. Become registered to another lamb. But if they want to withdraw their number, they can only withdraw while the lamb is still in existence. So what does this mean? So basically, in order to be part of the Paschal Lamb, you have to register. I've registered for the Paschal Lamb, basically, because we know the Mashiach is going to come. So even before Pesach, we're going to be able to bring the Paschal Lamb, and with the Mashiach. So in order to do that, you have to register. So I've registered in the past, and they have a register. And you could always, like you say, I'm going to register, let's say, with the Hertzfeld family, 10 people to register on each group. But then you say, you know what, I got a better invite. I got invited to the rabbi in wherever. There's so many other rabbis you could get invited to. So you could withdraw and join a different registry, but only until, Rashi's saying, only until the lamb was slaughtered. Once the lamb was slaughtered, you're stuck with that group.
What registration is this?
Paschal Lamb registration.
.com.
I mean, look at it. If you Google, you'll find it. Yeah. When Rabbi Steinsaltz of blessed memory was alive, he's the one who started it. There was a registration because
You have to pay to register?
no. You don't have to pay. I don't know if they're still doing it. I didn't do it. I haven't done it for a couple of years, but they had this registration. You see, when I did it, the Temple Mount was not a controversial political, what's the thing when you powder keg? But now if you start telling people you're Seder, you did that, you're all of a sudden associating with like a certain political element, which you might not want to associate with. So it got too complicated for me. So I just stopped doing it. And I just figured I'll still have time when the Mashiach comes. But I used to register at for the Paschal Lamb every year. You can look at it. If somebody Googles, you'll find it. Paschal Lamb registration in Jerusalem.
But then do they match you up with the families?
No, you can make your own group.
Oh, okay.
You make your own group. I don't know like where they used to register. I guess they used to go to the base of Mikdash and register. Who wants to be in my group this year?
I'd love to.
All right, I'll sign you in if I find it. And that would be a good one. Okay. Yeah. Rafi achlo, according to his eating, so this is to count those who are capable of eating. So if the person was elderly or sick, so they couldn't eat the kazayit, then the outsized portion, then they wouldn't be able to register. Tachosu titminu, you shall count them. And what do you have to bring as this Paschal Lamb? Seh tamim, a unblemished seh. Now, a seh can mean what animal can you bring as the Paschal Lamb, as the Paschal offering?
Sheep or a goat?
A sheep or a goat, right? A lamb or a kid. Zachar, it has to be a male. Ben Shana. What does that mean, Ben Shana?
1 year.
But what does 1 year old mean?
Under a year.
Under a year. Ben Shana means under a year. Right. You can't bring a lamb that's over a year. By the way, there's not that much, if you ever seen. And also,
There's not that much meat on it.
also the lambs were usually just born right around now. Like they're usually
Spring
born.
lamb.
Yeah, they're the spring lamb. And so they're little babies. They're not like
Well, if Pesach comes early,
My cousin
Pesach
emailed me.
comes early, then you get the lamb from the year before.
No, it has, I guess theoretically, it could be under a year.
My
Pesach
cousin
comes
has
late.
sheep. And she wrote me today an email. She said, yes, that the lambs are coming in and they are
Cute.
adorable.
Yeah, well, tell her to save one for us because
Well, she's in Australia.
she could ship it. Okay, said mina kvasim or mina izim tikachu, from the sheep or from the goats, you shall take it. Rashi says ben shana or tamim below mum, without a blemish. Ben shana kol shanatoi karoi ben shana. The whole year is called ben shana. Komar shenolad b'shana zu, was born in this year. Mina kvasim or mina izim, from the sheep and from the goats. What does it mean from the sheep and from the goats? Omizeh, either from this species or from that species. Sha'af is karoi seh. For a goat too is called a seh, as it states v'seh isim. And then the verse states, V'ayah lachem u'mishmeret, and then you have to watch his Paschal lamb until the 14th day of the month. Adar ba'asar yom Hachodesh hazeh, until the 14th day of this month. V'shachatu oto kol kaladat Yisrael bein arbayim. And the whole congregation of Israel will then slaughter it in the afternoon. Hello there, my friend. Kochava. Okay, so what does that mean? We have Vayalchem Lamishmeret, and then you shall guard it. Zel Hashem Bikur means to examine it. Sheta'un Bikur Mimum Arba Yamim Kodim Shlita. But you have to examine the animal for 4 days prior to the slaughter. So, by the way, I just want to say, do you know where else you have to, what we learned from this halacha, from this law, that you have to watch an animal for 4 days prior to the slaughter it to make sure there's no blemish? We learned from here that when we say slichot prior to the high holidays, it has to be for a minimum of 4 days prior to Rosh Hashanah. So then we investigate ourselves. We have to do repentance for a minimum of 4 days prior to Rosh Hashanah. And Rashi says, why do we have to make the taking of the Paschal lamb 4 days prior to Passover? Why didn't God just say take it on the 14th day? Because Mashet came Pesach Torah, but in all future generations, that wasn't an obligation. Like today, God willing, when the Messiah comes and and we have to go get a Paschal lamb, we don't have to do it 4 days before. You can go on Erev Pesach. You go to the sheep market and just buy a sheep, although I'm guarantee the Jews will raise the prices, but that's what they'll do. Rabbi Matya Mecharash taught. Why do they have to do it? Harehu Omer, because it states, Ve'evor alayach verech b'nei itech et dodim. The prophet says, this is in the Ezekiel, he says, I will pass by you and I saw, and behold, your time was a time of loving. Because what happened? Higia Shavua, the oath arrived. Shenishpati la'Avram, she'egael et banav. The oath arrived that I promised Abraham. I swore that I'm going to redeem his children. God had made an oath that he was going to redeem the Jewish people, but there were no commandments to get involved in. Meaning to say, in order to be redeemed, they had to be worthy of the commandments. So what did God do? As it states, the Jewish people were promised they had to be redeemed, but they had nothing that was worthy of being redeemed. So what did they do? God gave 2 commandments. God gave the Jewish people 2 commandments to be worthy of redemption. The blood of the Paschal lamb and the blood of the circumcision. They circumcised that night, as it states, you were wallowing in your bloods. And also it states, through the blood of your covenant, I sent free your prisoners from the waterless pit. Anyway, they needed time to draw away from idolatry. Jerry, we're going to take your question, then we have to pray the mincha prayer. What is your question, Jerry?